just kind of wild, right? Because if things do get bad, then they eventually get good. And why do they get good? There's just so much back and forth. I think the true lesson in all this is like, do we learn from our mistakes? Do we get better the next time? And then how do we tackle the new challenges that come into play?
Yeah, I think the answer is no to that. But
all right, we're back for another episode of Fully Funded. I am super excited because I am joined by an amazing guest here today. We'll get to him in just a moment, but before, I want to introduce my co-host, Mr. Christian Lopez. What's going on, sir?
it's going well, man. It's going awesome.
Did I ask you how are you doing or what's going on?
I thought you said
Who knows? But anyways, my name is Zach Bleznick, and I am joined by our guest today, Mr. Matthew Boyle.
How's it going, guys?
Actually, I'm really concerned. Did you care how I felt, or did you forget that you asked it? Do we have to roll
Christian,
this back?
I don't know if that was the best intro, but we're going to have to deal with it. I'll get to asking you how you're doing in a second, but we are here with Mr. Matthew Boyle today, our resident in-house operations team lead, data extraordinaire analyst, and we've got a very exciting show for you guys today. So today we are going to be actually going I'm going to say back to our roots because we don't talk a ton about real estate and mortgage today, but we're going to do a special mortgage and real estate segment today here on Fully Funded. And if you're listening to this podcast, hopefully it's right at the beginning of 2024, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a market update in regards to what's happening in the housing industry. And today's title of the show will be the 5 housing trends you need to look out for in 2024. So now, Mr. Lopez, how are you feeling?
I can speak now.
Yes, you can.
I'm feeling good. We're coming to the end of the year here, and there's a lot to be excited for in the new year. And I think that people have focused too much on the gloom of what 2023 was.
The gloom and doom.
And I don't think that there really was that much to worry about the gloom aspect of it.
Yeah.
But as we go into the new year, I think there's a lot to be excited about, and a lot that people can take advantage of if they're smart and they're willing to take those risks.
For sure. Is that what you thought about over the holiday break?
No, I was mostly thinking about catching up on sleep.
And brisket? Did you make anything good?
I didn't make actually, I didn't cook much. I did.
I saw you just ate some bolognese that you didn't share with it. Was that bolognese?
That was from
Is your
that
famous
was from the
bolognese?
potluck. That was
from the potluck?
I
You
froze it and put in. Yeah.
So you strategically freeze things that you want to be able to eat when you get a craving again?
Yeah. You make a big batch of something, you freeze it. It's really just being efficient.
Yeah.
Really. I did make some killer French toast casserole though.
French toast casserole?
Yeah.
Speaking about French toast, I actually the other night wanted to make some challah French toast. Not challah, challah, like challah bread, like the Jewish braided egg bread.
I always forget you're Jewish, but continue.
But I wanted to make some challah bread. I got to say challah. I could say it a couple times. And, I think it was like Christmas Eve and Publix was closed. So I decided to look up a recipe for challah bread to make challah French toast. I'm going to stop saying it like that.
I just want to know if it was hella good.
I actually did not make it. I looked at the recipe. I was like, I got to braid this 6-7 times. I'm not going to do it. But what about you, Matt? What'd you do over the break?
We actually did beef Wellington for the first time.
No way. I've always wanted to do a beef Wellington.
It was actually really good.
You made it?
I did not make it.
Oh, okay. Somebody made it.
It did not come in something I could put in the microwave, so
Yeah.
I did not make it.
Also, it has too many ingredients to it. If it was just
true.
the beef, Matt would have been
more than
fine.
two
Have you guys
things,
seen Gordon Ramsay's microwavable beef Wellington
No,
bites?
I've not seen it.
No, so Gordon Ramsay, this is how you know I watch too much TikTok. Gordon Ramsay just released a bunch of different things for the freezer aisle. And there's this guy on TikTok that there's so many of these foodies that try everything, but he's got these little snack-sized beef Wellingtons, and actually, surprisingly enough, his freezer appetizer snacks meals apparently are pretty delicious.
I just, before we even started filming, you talked about I don't really watch movies or TVs, but when it comes to a TikTok reference, you're all over.
That's where I get all my food stuff from when I actually eat,
Mm-hmm. So do you pick what you're going to eat based off the TikTok?
I'm always thinking about eating, and I definitely refer to TikTok for recipes.
What's the
and all that
best
kind of
thing
stuff.
you've discovered using TikTok?
I think probably places to eat. We went to New York City. I based all my bagel and pizza suggestions, which were definitely not the best thing to do.
That
I
pop
shouldn't
up
have done
bagel,
that.
you should just skip right over
Rip
that.
and dip.
No, You went to New York City for a Canadian bagel.
Yeah, well, you brought me back a lender's bagel on your way back. No,
It was
offense.
way better than the pop-up bagel.
Nadine brought me back some Zara's or something like that. It was pretty good. I had a couple of bagels.
Like pop-up bagel, like a bagel stand, or like a place called Pop-Ups?
It's called pop-up bagel.
Okay.
We probably shouldn't reference it too much since we didn't. give
I've
a
never been to
favorable
New
review,
York.
so
You've never been in New York? We need to
I've
get
never
you
been
out
to New
there.
York.
that makes sense.
So what else did you do over the break, Matt?
That was
Besides
pretty much
beef
it.
Wellington.
Besides beef Wellington,
Yeah.
Your brother made that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get anything good for Christmas?
I got a lot of socks.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my dad keeps stealing my socks, so I begged for socks this Christmas.
Like, are they, like, what kind of sock guy are you? Like an ankle sock guy?
I was an ankle sock guy until I worked here, and then I got made fun of for having ankle socks. And now
You were
I
wearing
have,
ankle
Who made
socks
you
with
now I
dress
have
shirt? Dress shoes?
Only one person you can think of could have possibly made fun of my socks.
But were you wearing it with those shoes?
That was wearing.
Because I got
So you're wearing-
I got the no shows on.
Yeah.
You were wearing ankle socks with dress shoes? That's
Yeah,
pretty
and that's-
baller, man.
Well, I had to show a little bit of
I
ankle
wouldn't-
for everybody, get them excited.
All right, so this is so much excitement for one day. We got beef Wellingtons and socks. So without any further ado, let's get into today's episode. So Matthew, really am excited to have you on today because one thing that you bring to the team that's absolutely tremendous is just a tremendous amount of information, but the way that you're able to regurgitate that information regarding housing stats and everything in between is just such a great way that the team could understand, apply, and then take out to the masses. So I thought no better than kind of to talk about some of the housing trends that I see going on. But, you know, just from an overall perspective going into 2024, and you take a look at Florida housing reports because that's where you do most of your business with your team. What do you overall see happening in the housing industry, and what would be kind of like a summary of this year and what's happened in 2023 before we move into 2024?
So for 2023, I think everybody's felt the fact that there was a shift in demand in the negative perspective. I think we were down year over year 30% from the previous year. Mm-hmm. But the thing of it is that nobody wants to say it, but that's natural. Every so often we go through what's called a correction, where especially when you have this huge increase in values where the market skyrockets, we always experience what's called a correction where it sort of brings it back down to where it should be, because naturally over time values will increase on just about everything, houses, stock market, everything. But if they go too fast, people can't keep up with it, wages can't keep up, things get too expensive, so we inevitably hit a correction.
Yeah, we even had crazy things like values going up and then people bidding over value. They're like, okay, yeah, this is the value of the house. Yeah. We're going to pay you $100,000 more. And the values had to kind of keep up with those increases because it didn't matter what things appraised for. It essentially meant what those comparables actually sold and got recorded.
Yeah, which is insanity.
Yeah.
And it also had to do with COVID. There was a huge disruption in the supply chain. So there were almost no houses being built for a very long period of time. So you have no new houses, a spike in demand, probably I think the lowest rates anybody's seen in maybe 40 or 50 years. So you have almost this perfect storm of circumstances that leads everything to having a huge amount of people interested in buying a house and no houses available.
Well, and there was the big demographic shift too, because you had people who were like, all right, I can stay in this $1 million tiny little house in New York, or I can buy a mansion for half the price in Florida. Yeah. I'll pay an extra 20% over. I have all this extra cash I can work with.
Yeah. So you had all of that, and now we are where we're at because people got to cash in, and then now we have to essentially reap the benefits of what ended up happening with that. But the fact of the matter is that no matter where you are in the economy, there's always a space for a win. It's just a shift in how you have to sort of address the economy. So now we're moving into 2024, where finally everybody's saying, you know what, maybe we don't want to pay 20% over appraised value anymore. Maybe that was a little bit reckless. So you're going to have a slow in demand in 2024, but not for very long. Because what's happening is the supply is actually picking back up. And as supply picks back up and demand stays either down or where it's at, prices are going to start to come down. People are going to have to start to make concessions on their homes. And it will end up driving more people back into the market. But we're just shifting towards more of a healthy environment.
Yeah. So is that why you say the next 6 months potentially could be some of the best time to buy a home if you're thinking about getting into the market in 2024?
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so important to stay on top of what's happening statistically and with trends in the economic side of real estate more so than even on the sales side. Because if you know what's going to happen before it happens, you have all the power in the world.
Yeah.
So right now, everybody's saying, well, I'm not going to get in the market because the market's bad. Well, guess what? It's too late. If you know the market's bad, so does everybody else. So you're not going to be able to take advantage of not being in the market because it's already bad.
Yeah.
It's already bad. If anything, you're in a position now to take advantage of the fact that it's a less crowded market, not just with buying a house, but also with expanding your business. There's no better time to go and take real estate as far as your market share than when it's bad, because in turmoil, there's always vacuums. People get out of the game. People aren't making as much money as they used to. People aren't spending as much as marketing. So if you have the tenacity to actually get out there and get stuff done, bad times are the absolute best time to do it, because nobody's looking for a new partner when times are good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got plenty of business. They're seeing you come in. You're, young and upcoming. They're like, I don't want to work with you. I've been doing, 15 years of business with this guy. But when times are hard and you're an agent only closing like one deal every other month, and a loan officer comes in and says, hey, how'd you like to close 2 deals every month instead of 1? You might actually take a look at that person.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So when you think of, when I hear a lot, right? Hey, prices are going to keep, a lot of agents go out there, prices are going to go up. Right? As soon as interest rates settle down, the demand's going to go up and people are going to come into it. But that seems like such a basic conception.
Yeah.
And if that was the case, then the demand wouldn't stop now. So, but you're saying that we might see a little bit of a dip in price. Mm. So how do you define that short term and then long term? Is that dip going to keep riding out? I mean, eventually, if rates do drop, which every indication is saying, we shouldn't see a dip in pricing.
Yeah. Well, the thing of it is that even if rates drop 2% today, it would probably be about 3 months before the market itself actually caught up to that. So the big drop that we've seen in the past month, it'll probably be 2 or 3 more months before people figure out, oh, wait a minute, rates have dropped, which is exactly what happened when rates were going up. Rates had hit 5.5%, 6% before people said, oh, wait a minute, rates aren't 2% anymore, because that's just how long it takes for that information to filter into, everyday life, because not everybody's looking at their computer. What are rates doing today?
Yeah.
So
for the second half of 2024, do you would that be the first trend that we could potentially see housing prices tick up if rates do come down, and we see people kind of create more awareness around that, hey, rates are finally down, demand tends to tick up?
Yeah.
Typically, historically, does that mean prices will rise as demand rises?
In general, yes. I think the important thing to remember is that, because first of all, I would not be doing my due diligence if I told you I knew exactly what's going to happen next month or following month. Any economist that tells you they know exactly what's going to happen in the next 6 months is a hack, because nobody does. Anything could happen. But at the very least, we're going to see stabilization where there's not going to be a dip in value. Right now, there's a drop in pricing, an asking price, but not necessarily a loss in value in homes, which is what everybody from my parents' generation is waiting for. They're waiting for a return to 08, which is not going to happen. There was a different reason that things happened in 08 than we have now. So what we're seeing is people are less willing to buy a home for what it's worth, not that homes are worth less than what they are. So as we go later into 2024, at the very minimum, you should expect to see stabilization of home prices. So they won't get any less expensive, essentially.
Yeah.
They may get less expensive up until March, but as soon as March hits, seasonality is going to kick into place. Tons of people are going to be buying homes, and that's going to wipe out any gains anybody would have had going into March.
So guys, look out for a potential increase in housing prices. So 6 months is really a great opportune time for you to get in. There's been a lot of talk today about interest rates. For the listeners, Matt, I think a lot of people don't really understand the effects on inflation with the CPI, Consumer Price Index reporting, and just in general how interest rates work. Would you like to touch a little bit on that?
That might be a long conversation.
Well, I'm sure you're only gonna bring great information. So, what is kind of the basics of inflation, CPI reports, some of the stuff that you've been looking at indicate? Let's talk about what's indicated moving forward. We've seen a nice drop in interest rates. I mean, just 2 months ago, interest rates hit 8% plus. Now we're seeing in a lot of our loan programs low 6s, even some 5s in some certain cases. But what's going to continue to drive down interest rates?
It's going to be sad to say it, but it's going to be the correction. So as the economy gets slower, in order to generate more business, banks drop their rates, because just like anybody else, they want to entice more people to come and, do business with them. Yeah. So they're going to drop their rates. They're going to drop their credit card rates and everything like that. And it's because the economy is getting a little slower. I don't really want to talk about that because what we're going to experience is more of like a soft landing. So
Right.
I don't want to sit here and talk about how much rates are going to drop and how much they're going to do that, because what's going to happen is we're going to get back into March, not just in real estate, but in general. We're going to roll into June, and we're going to see that spending is going to start to go up. Inflation won't increase, but we're going to see a stabilization in retail spending. So this big rate drop that everybody's waiting for isn't really going to happen. We've probably already experienced it. Maybe we'll lose another 0.25% at most, but
Bring on the fours.
yeah.
Well, I mean, and when you look back at the trends, like when you mentioned before, when rates hit fives, it took people a while to get there, and then everybody kind of backed off.
Yeah.
And then they were in the fives for a little bit, and then everybody started buying again. And then rates ticked up into the sixes, and everybody backed off, and they waited, and then it's almost like gas prices. Like we complain when prices go up, and then we get accustomed to it. And so I hear a lot of what you're saying in that is that, yeah, we're waiting for this huge rate drop, but what does that even look like for us? But if we look at trends, we're saying, listen, over the next 6 months, we might see a little bit of price reductions. If you're smart, you're not taking the price reduction. Maybe you're taking concessions, right, to limit your overall investment.
Yeah.
But let's say rates stay where they're at now, 6 months from now, when the demand increases, maybe that's the new low, and that's when everything ticks up. Because it's the demand that's going to drive everything.
Yeah. And this might just be me and my personal situation, but if I had the choice between rates going down 0.25% or having a 1% increase in seller concessions, I would take 1% seller concessions every single time, because it's more important for me to keep my money than it is to save $50 a month, because I can use that money to do something else. I know that rates are important to a lot of people, but the sad fact of the matter is it's because most Americans aren't taught much financially. So rates is something you can wrap your hands around, even with your average education. You can say, my rate was 6.5, I think that's good, or my rate was 7.5, I think that's bad. But really, that's why having a good LO, in my opinion, is so important, because you need someone who's been in the industry for a long time to sort of explain to you that there are so many more financial avenues that you can take in your home buying process that allow you to grasp more than just what my rate is, because that might not be the most important thing for you.
And it usually isn't. Like we get caught up on the interest rate, but it's usually not what's going to get your long-term goals in.
Yeah.
But let's say rates do drastically drop and we're all wrong and they go into the 4% range. Well, then what does that eventually tick? I mean, imagine rates drop to 4% before the end of the year.
Yeah.
What happens to our housing market?
Well, it's not going to correct.
It's not going to correct.
No.
Not in the way long term, right?
Yeah.
Right. But people may be more likely to sell because, the rate's about even what they had. So it's not going to drop prices down. It's probably going to push it up, which is what most people are expecting.
Yeah.
But what if I bought today and I'm paying 8%?
Yeah.
So the point I'm bringing up and looping this all together is that we all get focused on when's the right time to buy.
Yeah.
Right. We're waiting for it to bottom out. We're waiting for prices to crash. We're waiting for all these things to happen. And inevitably, it's not happening the way we're anticipating it because nobody can predict the future.
Yeah.
Which is why you take the market today and maybe some trends to know what's going to happen over the next 6 to 12 months to make that decision.
I guess with that, I'd like to pitch my speculation. So a very likely outcome is that the Fed's not going to drop rates for another 4 months because they don't want to jinx themselves. They finally got inflation kind of where they want it to be, so they're just going to let it sit. After 4 months, they'll drop it 1/4. And then in 3 months, they'll drop it 1/4. And then 3 months, they'll drop it 1/4. And then 3 months, they'll drop it 1/4 because they're not in a rush to drop the rates. So if you are of the opinion that the Fed directly controls the rates, which they don't, then you're going to be waiting probably up to 3 or 4 years for them to drop the rate to what you would consider, worth you getting into the market. And even then, you're not going to get your 5% seller concession anymore. So you've essentially given away $25,000. So, and the other thing is that the last time rates were this high, I think in 2001, it took about 15 years for them to drop 2%. So if you're waiting for that, you're going to be waiting a long time. But what you can get in on and get on very quickly is like what we're talking about, which is what can I buy the house for? What kind of concessions can I get? That's something that you can look at on a month-to-month basis and say, all right, I'm ready to make it. Mm-hmm. And that's something also you could probably say, I'm going to wait 1 more month because I know the market's going to get even slower in January. I'm going to buy my house in January, and I know I want to buy before March. So that's something you can plan on. That's something you can save money for. That's something you can go around and say, hey, family, I'm getting ready to do this on this house. Can we line up some gift money? I'm going to execute in maybe like late January, early February before March comes in. Because like I said, the second March comes in, housing explodes in March. So whatever gains you would have seen by acting when the market is preferable to you are more than likely going to get washed away.
So I'm going to ask a very simple question. I know a lot of people ask this. Are we in a buyer's market or are we in a seller's market? And it'd be interesting to hear both of your perspectives on it.
I'll let Zach go first.
Are we in a buyer's or seller's market? I mean, I think people say that we're in a balanced market, but I really feel as though we've touched more on the buyer's market than the seller's market, just because, you know, being in loan origination like I am, I see the negotiating power. I think it is I think it's really based on circumstantial, meaning where are you buying, what neighborhood, what market. This is going to be crazy to say, what agent are you using, right? Because I think using the right agent with the right experience who's going to negotiate on your behalf is going to allow you to achieve the terms you're wanting, because inventory is high. You know, there are a lot of options on the market. Certainly if you're in a very sought out neighborhood, something like that might change, but I do believe that buyers have a tremendous amount of power that they didn't have before.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. As far as the numbers say, we're actually in what's called a balanced market, where there's some seller power and there's some buyer's power. We actually don't get into what's considered a buyer's market until you get into the 6, 7, 8% seller concession range, where the buyer really can say, I want that at a 10% discount. It's just like you said with gas prices. For 2 years, the sellers have been spoiled with a 100 to 105% asking price guarantee. So now that the buyers have a little bit of wiggle room, the seller's like, I'm dying, because they're not getting it all their own way anymore. Mm-hmm. So we think it's a buyer's market, or a lot of people are saying it's a buyer's market. It's just because they've been so used to the sellers having all of the cards that now that the buyers have some, it's been this big shift for everybody.
So if we had to kind of make a bet, would we say that the trend going into 2024 for the time being, at least the first 6 months as things stand, that buyers will have more negotiating power and the ability to get a great deal?
Yeah, I'd say they would continue to gain ground.
Okay, so look out for that trend here in 2024 is finding the right deal if you are a buyer. Now, I want to also briefly touch on the concept of recession, because I find it fascinating. When you look at the United States of America, we are really just a business, right? Our revenue is pulling in taxes, and we have these people at the top in these executive branches that are supposed to be managing it, just like executives in any type of business. So I think it's just super interesting how it is. Do you think a recession today is just much different than any recession we've ever spoken before? Because at least in my lifetime, the recessions that I've experienced, which, you know, was the 2009, 2010 housing bubble, and then now, which people were calling a recession, they were managed much differently than past recessions. So do you think our country has learned, just like businesses learn, how to manage this, and as a result, we're able to experience these quote unquote soft landings? Or do we have something coming that we've simply never experienced before, so we don't know what it looks like, and we're in for some serious pain, maybe not this year, but the following? A lot to unpack, I know.
Yeah. The thing of it is that as much as everybody wants to say that economics is a science, it's more of like a soft science, where there's a lot of theory and not a lot of it's been proven. Everybody knows about supply and demand, but when it actually comes to monetary and fiscal policy, there's a lot of things that we just kind of do, and we hope that they do the right thing. Like the Fed has their rate, the government has the ability to spend, and both of those affect the GDP, but they affect it in a roundabout and soft way that they don't really say, if we do this, then this will do this. Mm-hmm. So it's really more circumstantial, like what is causing the recession, what led up to the recession, what is, you know, the world environment at the time of a recession. Like in my personal opinion, we were due for a recession before COVID hit. Everything was trending towards the correction because we were doing so well for so long. The economy works like this. There's never always going to be good times. It always comes back. So we were due for a recession. I don't know how bad it would have been, but COVID happened and everything stopped, including the recession. And then the government spent a ton of money, and the Fed did what it did to try and keep the economy going, because we went from having a recession to having no economy at all to having a massive economy, which that's insane. Over the course of 5 months, you had a complete economic upheaval, both one direction and then the other direction. So nobody knew what was going on. But as far as have we learned, I think the Fed has learned a little bit. The Fed is very cautious. The Fed's job is not to make anybody's lives better. It's just to make sure that the economy doesn't collapse.
Yeah. So do we believe that we have a massive recession incoming? I mean, we've got people who have credit card debt higher than ever. We have people that are going to default. We've got a lot of bad things happening that people are not talking about. But with all the bad, my question again is there some good in meanings that we learned? We know what options, people are not as prideful, people have built a ton of equity, so maybe they're hurting, they've never hurt as much as they are now, but they're taking advantage, tapping into home equity lines of credit, and they're managing their debt and learning from that experience so we don't experience it in the future.
I mean, if you want to simplify our economy, people just have to spend money.
Yeah.
And people have not stopped spending money.
Yeah.
And it's a matter like, is that time going to come? If people are smart and they start to get overwhelmed and they want to leverage their equity in their home, maybe get out of HELOC, maybe do a cash out because they can afford the payments on those versus these high interest credit cards. I've been saying it for a while. Everybody's been focusing on the housing crisis of 2008 or 7, whenever all that happened. I should know, I lived it, but everybody's focused on that. That's not what's going to crash. The housing market's not what's going to crash our economy if it does happen. It's more likely going to be what happens to all these banks when these commercial buildings start defaulting. Yeah. And when people realize, I've gotten to the point where it's unbearable and bankruptcies start to hit the roof. Yeah. And that trickle effect affects the bigger guys, and it eventually comes down the line. And then of course you have technology, which is continuing to take jobs, and you have other companies that are continuing to shrink up with this. So if something does happen, it's gonna not be one thing that triggers it. It's just a matter of when do we stop spending money. Yeah. And if history proves itself, then we just go to war and everything resolves itself.
But it is just kind of wild, right? Because if things do get bad, then they eventually get good. And why do they get good? There's just so much back and forth. I think the true lesson in all this is like, do we learn from our mistakes? Do we get better the next time? And then how do we tackle the new challenges that come into play?
Yeah, I think the answer is no to that. But if we're all dealt the same, somebody told me today, it's like, as long as I'm dealt the same cards as the next person, I can live with whatever comes. And that's ultimately what we have to figure out as individuals is whatever's going to happen, we have little control over. There's people well above us that make all the decisions that affect the average human here on earth. So if you're talking from a business perspective, you're dealt the same deck of cards and you have to learn how to pull the best hand out of it. And it's that it ends up being that simple.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, we just talked about tapping into some of this equity to take advantage of debt consolidation. Christian, you run a very successful mortgage team out of Orlando. HELOCs, I know, have been something that has come on your team's radar. You guys are doing a lot more of those. Can you just explain for the listeners what a HELOC is? And if you are having some financial woes or maybe just want to tap into some equity, what exactly that looks like?
Yeah. I mean, a mortgage, people don't realize how simple a mortgage is. It's a loan based off the value of a property. So when you buy a house, you're saying, I want this property, I'm at this loan, and you're just switching it. You're just saying, hey, give me this money, I'll let you lean on this house, and then I'll live in it, and I'll enjoy the appreciation that comes from it. Yeah. A HELOC is the same thing. You're taking out a loan based off of the equity of your home. People are using it to consolidate debt. Maybe they've got their spending out of control. They don't want to get rid of their 3% or even possibly less.
So you don't have to touch
rate.
The first interest rate. This is a second mortgage.
You don't touch the first interest rate. It's a second mortgage. You can do it.
It's like a credit card.
It's like a credit card. You can do it like a credit card, like a house, right? So I take $100,000 out. I pay interest on it unless I choose to pay the balance back. I have a certain amount of time I could do that, or I can get a real second loan, a true loan that has a start and an end date. It's fully amortized. And then I'm going to use that to either, like I said, consolidate debt. People are using it to invest in more real estate. So they'll take money out of their primary. They'll use that money as a down payment on investment property. Like I said, I don't think property values are going to be, or housing is going to be the thing that collapses this country, because everybody needs a roof over their head. Yeah. And people are, whether it's short-term or long-term rentals, using that equity. It's all about what you use it for, right? Yeah. Anytime you save $1, it's not about saving that $1. It's about what you're going to do with that $1 that matters.
Yeah, I want to approach the topic of house hacking, where you talk about what you're doing with that equity. Something I found really, really, really interesting lately is the concept, instead of going out and buying another rental property, we're going to talk about that in a second, but actually improving upon the property you live in. Like, I live in a community in a town called Lake Nona in Florida. It's a suburb of Orlando, and a lot of people have like 3-car garage, detached garages in the back, and for 60, 80, or 100,000, whatever it costs, depending on the size, they'll build an additional property, and these properties or these apartments above the garage at $100,000, even at a 10% interest only loan, you're talking about what, $800 a month. These units are bringing like $1,800 to $2,000 plus. So think about tapping into equity. What type of home improvements can you do to your house? Do you have the ability to do turn your primary residence into a quote unquote rental property?
Especially when a studio apartment is what $1,800 a month in our area.
It's wild.
If you can build that out for somebody and charge them that discount, you're gonna have people begging you for an opportunity to rent it.
Yeah, and you're a young man, Matthew. You've heard about the some of the it's true. You've heard about some of the house hacking trends where as a first-time buyer, now they're going out with the recent changes in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac now allowing 5% down on a conventional loan. You could buy up to a 4-unit household with only 5% down, live in 1 unit, rent out the other 3. Knowing what you know today, would that be a path that you would take or encourage people of your generation to jump into a duplex, triplex, quadplex before jumping into a single family home?
I mean, yeah, my difficulty's been finding one.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people know that now because it's been so popular to talk about it on social media. Everybody's like, you got to get the duplex, got to get the triplex, got to get the quadplex. I don't think there's a single one for less than $1 million within like 50 miles of me.
Yeah,
right now.
they're there. You just got to fix them up. But it is a great trend, guys, something to look out for. It's a way to really scale your portfolio super quick in 2024 is that whole house hacking concept. And now I've even heard of the whole concept of pad splitting, which investors are finding that with higher interest rates that we're unable to get the same returns they were. Maybe the Airbnb market is a little bit unstable because it's just saturated with a ton of different properties unless you have a unique experience that's bringing you to your property. Pad splitting is something unique that you can now rent out per room, and then let's say $1,000 per room instead of $2,500 or $3,000 for the whole place. Now an investor's making $4,000 off of 4 rooms.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that have done that in like the UCF area. Instead of putting their kids in dorms, will go rent the house and then rent it out or buy the house and rent it out to each room.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So guys, with that being said, let's just kind of recap some of the trends that you should be looking at for 2024. So first and foremost was house hacking, right? The ability to kind of leverage real estate in different unique ways to get a greater return, maybe with rates a little bit higher or home price a little bit higher. That doesn't mean that you can't be in the real estate market. We also talked about tapping into home equity.
Right. You can use that to facilitate that house hacking.
You got it. House hacking.
There we go.
Right?
Hack house.
According to Matthew, our in-house resident expert of all things, we are thinking that potentially we're going to stick into a either balanced or buyer's market with potentially house prices maybe going up as interest rates continue to trend down. So many good things happening, and hopefully we continue to have a soft landing in terms of our economic outlook and not headed towards a recession, which makes me really excited because I'm in mortgage and real estate as my primary 9-to-5 job, as well as the two.
I think the thing is like, don't be impatient about it. Take the opportunity to talk through it. If we're in a balanced market right now, that means if you're on the fence, you need to start figuring out how to get over that fence because there are opportunities out there available for you. So be patient about it. Maybe the duplex isn't as great as you want to be long term, but you buy it 5% down, you enjoy it for about a year or 2 years, a couple of years while somebody else is paying your mortgage because they're renting out that other side. And then move on from there, right? So take advantage of the market, especially if we are teetering into a buyer's market because it doesn't stay that way forever.
Yeah.
Now, Christian, if people want to find you, get information on how to obtain a mortgage, HELOC, or getting more information about interest rates, how can they find you or your team?
All right. Well, we're Home First Lending. We're based out of Orlando, Florida. We service not just the state of Florida, but multiple states throughout the Southeast. We'll drop my Instagram handle here in the comment section below, and you can follow us that way. And
all right, and Matt, do you have any secret hidden social media or way that people can get a hold of you?
Nope, I definitely don't.
So you're off the radar, guys. You could always find me on Instagram, Zach_the mortgage broker. As always, make sure you guys follow along with the show, subscribe. Please put comments of other things that you guys want to see or guests that you want to see on the show. We're actually going to be transitioning to doing more real estate conversations, hopefully once a month, as we feel we could bring tremendous value to the real estate and mortgage community, along with everything else when it comes to being fully funded, which is health, finance, and lifestyle. So guys, thank you so much again. Like and subscribe. Find us on all major platforms, and we'll see you back again on another episode of Fully Funded. Peace out.